White House, thank you. Joining us now, Congressman Adam Schiff. He's the ranking Democrat of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, I want to get your quick reaction to the breaking news. Federal agents seeking access to records related to that infamous Access Hollywood videotape in their raid yesterday against Michael Cohen, the president's longtime attorney. What's your reaction?
Well, my reaction is a couple things. First, I think they're doing their job, and if there's any issue with the execution of a warrant, the president ought to know that you go to court to try to suppress any evidence. You don't fire the prosecutors. That would be an obstruction of justice. But I think there are at least a couple possibilities that you've outlined, Wolf. This could be about whether Michael Cohen was making an effort to suppress release of that tape, much like he was trying to pay hush money for these other people, Stormy Daniels, among others, to keep their stories out of the press during the presidential campaign, and whether that was a violation of the campaign finance laws not to report it. That's one possibility. It's also possible that they're looking at whether the Trump campaign and Michael Cohen had any role in the timing of the WikiLeaks dump of the Russian stolen Podesta emails. I tend to think it is more likely the former, because this was referred by the special counsel to the Southern District of New York. I think that indicates that it probably had more to do with the issue of Stormy Daniels and campaign finance law violations than it did on the issue of potential collusion, but it could be a combination of both.
You and your colleagues on the House Intelligence Committee, you've been looking into all of these things for about a year plus. Were you aware of these late-breaking developments that we're just learning about today?
We certainly weren't given a heads up that this warrant would be executed. I think that took everyone by surprise in Congress, as well as clearly within the White House. But I'm not at all surprised that once again the president is contemplating firing either Rod Rosenstein or Bob Mueller. Both of those would be acts of obstruction of justice. And to see him float in his tweets and otherwise the idea that he could somehow give a justification for it by pointing to Rod Rosenstein signing a FISA application, or even more bizarrely claim that because Rod Rosenstein wrote a memo that the president used as a pretext to fire Jim Comey, that gives him a pretext to fire Rod Rosenstein. It's bizarre. Plainly, either of those actions are designed to interfere with an investigation that may implicate the president. That is obstruction of justice. And if the president goes forward with either one of these firings, he is only making the case against himself for obstruction of justice. But it deeply worries me because it would throw this country into complete crisis.
It certainly would. You're a former federal prosecutor. How difficult would it be to get this kind of search warrant for the home, the hotel room, the office of the president's longtime personal lawyer?
Well, it would certainly be very difficult, and it would rise to the highest levels of approvals within the Justice Department because there is such assiduous attention paid to the attorney-client privilege. But there are two reasons why they may have concluded that they could go forward here, and with good reason. The first is that both the president and the lawyer, Michael Cohen, seem to be denying that if he'd made these payments as hush money, that they were doing it with the knowledge of the other. And clearly there's no attorney-client relationship in that act if there's no communication and it's not done under those auspices. But moreover, if this is part of a crime of evading campaign finance laws or intimidation, then there's a crime fraud exception that would more than justify this very unusual step. Can I make one other point on Rod Rosenstein, which I think really concerns me, because firing him, the president may conclude, is a more surreptitious way to get at Bob Mueller. There are two reasons why Americans should be concerned with this prospect. The first is that he can secretly, any replacement of Rod Rosenstein could secretly cripple the Mueller investigation by telling Mueller, you can't follow the money, you can't investigate this, or you need to wrap up that. But second, and I think this is really lost, Rod Rosenstein will make the decision whether a report from Bob Mueller ever sees the light of day, whether it's ever submitted to Congress for consideration of whether the president's conduct violated the law and might rise to the level of impeachable offense, or whether it's even presented to the Congress. That's a very important, maybe the most important decision, and the president, if he tries to fire Rod Rosenstein, is going to try to take away that decision and give it to someone who will simply do what he says. And that would be, in my view, another serious act of obstruction of justice.
Do you believe Congress should investigate these allegations against Michael Cohen?
Well, look, I think we had Michael Cohen testify before our committee. There were a lot of unanswered questions. If there are issues that have come up and further reason to believe that either he wasn't fully truthful with us or he may have been involved in other kind of criminal activity, it absolutely should be investigated by the Congress. Now, it may not be, if this is involving, for example, violation of campaign finance laws, that may not be an issue for the Intelligence Committee. It may be an issue for the Oversight Committee or one of the committees that is looking at elections. But nonetheless, clearly, the Congress would have an interest if any of the top officials of our government or those affiliated with the president are engaged in criminal activity.
So just to be precise on this issue of shelving or holding a report that Robert Mueller may come up with and not letting it go to Congress, not letting it be made public, for example, your fear is that if Rod Rosenstein is fired by the president, someone new coming in could do what the president wants and just kill the whole thing. We'd never know what the conclusions are. Is that your fear?
That is my fear. People need to understand that it's not Bob Mueller's job to tell the country what happened. It's his job to decide who should be prosecuted and who's violated the law. But if the special counsel decides that the president has violated the law and that it's not appropriate for him to seek an indictment of a sitting president, Bob Mueller would make a report to Rod Rosenstein, and Rod Rosenstein would decide what to do with it. Is that report made public? Is that report provided to Congress? You get rid of Rod Rosenstein, and who knows what happens to that report. So that is a deep concern to me, and I would view the firing of Rosenstein as every bit as much an act of obstruction as anything else the president could do.
Congressman